division of iTOO. But today's all about Lloyd Warwick and Albert de Bont and navigating renewable energy claims. We thought it would be quite a nice exercise to just get a loss adjuster's perspective, seeming our audience is geared towards brokers. So everyone, Albert likes to do these things in person, so it's going to be something new for him to do a presentation live online. But he also likes it to be very interactive. So please type any questions you have. I will moderate them and then ask Albert along the way. We can make this as interactive as you would like it to be. Ask Albert any questions regarding renewable energy claims and the loss adjusting process. I think it'd be quite nice for everyone just to understand where Albert's coming from, how he sees the whole claim unfolding, going from insurer to broker to client and the whole value chain. So we'll just keep it at as high level as possible and interactive as possible. So enjoy. I'll hand it over to Albert and he can give you a small brief introduction to Lloyd Warwick and himself and his credentials, and enjoy. Over to you, Albert.
Thank you. All right, so first of all, you could see the title screen. I think that what we'll do is I'll maybe just pause at certain points, then we can take some questions or have some discussions. But yeah, so I'm Albert. I'm a senior loss adjuster at Lloyd Warwick. Lloyd Warwick is a specialist loss adjusting firm. We're based in South Africa with offices all around the world. Our supposed main office is out in London. In South Africa, with 10 adjusters working in the large and complex claim space. So we typically focus on assets or risk, policy-related losses. We also do a bit of product liability and professional damage. Our main focus is property damage and machinery breakdown, following into business interruption. We're 6 engineers and 4 accountants in the business. As for myself, I qualified as a chemical engineer, worked in industry, and I'm now in claims. I think as it all goes, most people would probably have a collective laugh or a sigh on this call, but nobody really plans on going to insurance. I don't think I certainly didn't, and none of my colleagues did. And a lot of us came from different backgrounds and so on, and that's what makes this industry very, very interesting. So we're definitely a big mixture of people. I'm trying to recognize some names on the list, but it's just too many. But it's a nice industry, especially on the sort of upper tier claims, and it's really been a good 7 years that I've been working in this, and I look forward to engaging with more people. Right. So today, Jared asked me to look at to talk about renewable energy claims, and the thing with renewable energy, and this is why I said navigating in sort of square brackets or squiggly brackets renewable energy claims, is because it's navigating claims really, and all claims have a specific life cycle, but there's a lot of generalities between normal claims that we deal with. Let's just say our bread and butter claims, which is engineering and property damage, and then the renewable energy. So what I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about the claims process in general. So if I go to just a bit of an overview and a roadmap, it's really not a long one, but just the history and origins of loss adjusting. And I don't know if it's a fable, if it's true, but I believe that there is some sort of origin from it. The role of the loss adjuster, certainly the way that I see it, or that we see it as a business. And the claims process, and this claims process is the adjuster's perspective on the claims process. And it's not yet specific to renewable energy. And then we'll go into a little bit of renewable energy claims. And I just want to take you guys through each of them in no particular order, but there isn't obviously time to go into a lot of detail on all of them. We could do workshops for days on end on this. But by and large, three of the main types of renewables technologies that we see in terms of losses, and then two smaller ones that give people jitters and fears generally, and then we'll go into one or two wordings, again, not too much, and then we'll full circle back a little bit into what we think are tweaks and nuances to the renewable energy claims process, and then just a little bit of underwriting and risk. And I think this is like really in a nutshell, and I appreciate everybody on the call is probably various backgrounds and positions, and what you want to take out of this. I've tried to keep it as broad as possible, but let's get into it. So apparently, that's a picture of the Great Fire of London in 1666, and obviously a massive catastrophic event that took place and resulted in a significant amount of property being damaged, all in one place. And obviously with industrial revolutions and that sort of thing going on, and development of monetary markets and so on, there was a property insurance, or a type of property insurance developed, and these people carrying this risk, however they started doing it, that's probably a whole course at university somewhere. They were faced with some predicaments. Why did this thing happen? Should I be paying it? Should I be covering it? What was the extent of it? How do we pay the policyholder? How do we compensate them? And they were faced with a further question as well: who could now be trusted to report to us? Should it be someone in our own organization? Should it be the policyholder themselves? And they turned to the clergy, and of course nothing wrong with the clergy. They just were thought to be truthful and honest, and then there was a realization that whilst they could be truthful and honest, it's quite difficult to deal with the nuances, the ever-changing nuances of insurance, and all the implications of that. Obviously, there's reference here to risk carriers, which is much more of a UK term. So effectively, loss adjusting as a profession was born out of that, and has evolved over the last couple of 100 years, obviously, and today is becoming extremely important, I think, for all stakeholders. We're all in the same boat effectively, and we're seeing obviously trends where loss adjusting has become more of a profession, where insurers have become very specific on which adjusters they want to appoint for which risks, and you'll see then subject matter experts becoming loss adjusters. So what is the role of the loss adjuster? Well, the why and the what. So typically we're appointed by the insurer, and usually by the lead, and we're named or nominated on a policy. I don't, we obviously sometimes see broker appointments and that sort of thing, but generally the guy with the balance sheet or the checkbook is the one to say that. The independence is very important, especially to us. Our firm, we don't do any public adjusting. We don't cross that barrier, and we also try to remain independent. Though we're appointed by the insurer, we don't have. There's no contractual relationship in the sense that we're not an employee, and that's quite an important distinction. We're not assessors. There's a lot of people who call us assessors or think we're assessors, but there's a completely different role being an assessor and a loss adjuster. And I think the role of the loss adjuster as well is to be familiar with the subject matter of the claim and the business. How can you adjust a claim, or even understand the quantum and the business interruption implications of a claim if the business is not understood. And that goes the same for broking and for insurers. There needs to be some application of mine. And the working knowledge of the provisions of that policy is important, whether it's, and we'll see just now a little bit later, whether it's a South African wording or a UK reinsurer wording. By and large, there are similarities in the wordings for renewables claims. For traditional machinery and electrical breakdown will be specific wordings. And of course, since COVID, we've seen a lot of change in the industry and wordings and so on. And our role is to gather the facts, to collect the facts, gather the evidence, and is to really progress, facilitate, and I'm going to use the word facilitate a lot, facilitate the claim process. And to me, every claim is a project. If I have 50 claims on the go at the moment, I've got 50 projects, because every claim has a different set of people involved with different expectations and different needs and desires. So, and I think what's quite important here is that our firm, and maybe a little bit of marketing, but I won't go too long into that, is we want to have a good outcome. There's a saying about the outcome of a good claim is that everyone walks away equally unhappy. Now, that it's tongue in cheek, but it's probably right. You go into negotiation, and we're not horse trading. We're talking about things that are black and white, that are in a contract, which is the insurance contract. And we're talking about facts that somebody who's qualified to look at it can consider. So we're there to report to insurers to facilitate the resolution of the claim. We don't want claims to go to end up at the lawyers. We had some marketing and some lunch with some lawyers the other day, and we said to them, sorry to tell you, but we don't like to see you that often, because then it means something has gone wrong along the lines, whether it's expectation management or personalities or poor coverage decisions, etc. So I think in terms of the claims process, I mean, it would be nice to create a manual or handbook on this, and maybe that's a retirement plan. But from an adjuster's perspective, we are there to see the claim from when it happens. So the claim is a disaster; it's a catastrophe. Nobody has planned for it. Everything that's been done up to that 1 minute prior to the fire or the explosion or the breakdown, that's all been done in preparation for that bad day or that eventuality that there's a claim. And there's a lot of iterations and variations in this, but by and large, these couple of bullet points, in my mind, is what the claims process entails. And as I said, it will be a little bit different on liability policies, on FG policies, that sort of thing. But for the types of assets that we're looking at now, it's focusing a bit more on renewables. These are the things that we see it going. So starting from confirmation of appointment, it's an email or it's a phone call or it's a WhatsApp message or something like that. Establishing first contact with the insured is such an important aspect of the process. And then what we always say, and we're training some juniors now, reviewing the policy conditions in preparation for the site visit. If we have the policy wording and the schedule, especially the schedule, we understand what the intention of the cover was, so that when we go to site, we already have it back in our mind that there's a hot works exclusion in this policy, or there's no cover for breakdown, or there's sublimits for X, Y, and Z. So it's framing how it's providing a lens for us. And getting on the ground and taking preliminary review of what's on site. That one little email with 5 nested emails from this person to that person. You pull that out and you can see someone did an incident report. Maybe there was a claim form. Maybe there was an email internally from one manager to the other. But what is actually going on here? What is this all about? And where is the site? Is it going to take us half an hour to get there, or is it 3 days of travel? There's some African countries, of course, that we go to. It takes us 3 or 4 days of travel. So getting on the ground is essential. And even if we don't think it's necessary to get on the ground, 9 times out of 10 it absolutely is. And what I'll do is at the end of this, I'll just go over to Jared just to facilitate some questions. And identifying insurable interest as well. You have a site that has it's an assets or risk policy, and you've been appointed by the assets insurer, but there's some construction going on. Do we know which assets are under construction and which assets are part of the plant? Very important for us in the more complex space. Is it necessary, and who should we instruct as subject matter experts? Whether it's a fire investigator, whether it's a forensic metallurgist, whether it's the electrical engineer. What has actually happened? And do we apply our minds to appointing somebody to assist us, to best assist the insurer with making the correct decisions? And often the subject matter experts, as Jared and I have also encountered on some recent claims, is that not only do they assist with identifying, determining the cause of a loss, they also assist with the extent of damage and potentially with future risk mitigation. So there's a real benefit going forward from having those subject matter experts involved. And of course, that has to happen quite early. And these insureds are dealing with a catastrophe or disaster where nobody planned for this, and their day job is not to determine what caused the gearbox to fail or what caused this fire. It's for them important to get on with their business. And I mean, clear communication lines need to be established. That is a part of that is part and parcel of the process that we find is extremely valuable. People will often say this is just send us an information request or speak to so and so, but those clear communication lines is part of the process. That when we leave site, it's important to know who is the who's the lantern holder at the insured, who's the lantern holder at the broker, so that we know what's going to happen. As I said earlier, projects, each claim is a project, and if you have a project management team, call it a project management team, I suppose, but you could have an insured who has a financial manager and a technical manager and a process or production person or operator, but who is going to lead the project of getting this claim over the line? And that is really important. And then the rest of it, really important, the disaster recovery plan, loss mitigation. And why is the adjuster involved in that conversation? Because the adjuster has looked at the policy, has spoken with the insurer, and subject to accepting liability and so on, there are conversations that can be had early. Unfortunately, there's a thing called industrial blindness that happens with insureds, and they are really good at what they do, but that is their industry and that is their job. So being able to guide them and to say, in your policy, you have access to these specific extensions, or there's increased costs of working, or additional increased costs of working, or temporary measures, etc. So those having them early on is essential. And of course, when there's business interruption claims, especially in the renewable space, if you've lost an Eskom transformer, your claim can stack up into the hundreds of millions very quickly without you having any control over that. So what are the timelines for restoration, whether it's in or outside of your control? And then, of course, as the adjuster, we don't formulate claims for the insured. There's an important point that I think needs to be remembered, is that the insured or the policyholder needs to formulate and submit their claim in terms of the policy. But of course, we can give guidance and guidelines. And
Albert, can I just jump in quickly? When there is a claim ongoing, are you chatting with the insured to try and get the project in this specific reference, solar or wind, up and running as quickly as possible? Are you holding their hand through the process, or do you just let them get on with it by themselves? Or
so it's a nice question, but A lot of the time it depends on the insured, and some insureds have because of their portfolio, they have a lot of claims, so they know how to deal with claims. And you'll get a very quick impression. These guys have already made a plan. You'll get to site and they've already made a plan for a spare transformer, or they've already ordered a replacement blade. And for those who haven't done that, obviously there's quite a bit of upfront work to do, is to explain this is what we're here to do, and that will, on a project per project basis, a claim by claim basis, it will depend. But we can't be seen to 6 months down the line, everybody's unhappy, nobody's given guidance. I can't then write to my principal, which is, let's say you in this case, and say, oh, sorry, Jared, I forgot to tell the insured they need to reinstate. So it's absolutely essential to take them through that process, and hence why a weekly meeting, initial site meeting is good, and then a weekly Teams meeting, even if it's just 15 minutes, even if it's just 2 minutes to say something. Someone might pipe up and say, I spoke to so-and-so within the company and they said this, what do you think? So that clear communication flow is very valuable. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, thank you.
And then, discuss policy concerns. Look, I mean, you won't know all of them right up front, but again, if I've spoken to Jared and I've seen something on site, which I think there's a sublimit for a breakdown cover, or there's some sort of potential issue with coverage issues or whatever the case may be, then we can discuss it and alert the broker, depending on the relationships, ahead of time, rather than getting to the end of the claim and having that battle or that debate. Again, nobody's perfect. There are mistakes that are made, wherever it is in the value chain. It's absolutely possible that things happen, and unfortunately, as much as preparation can happen in underwriting side, claims is where problems and cracks.
Yeah, I think just on that point, Albert, I think it's good to manage expectations up front with the insured and with the loss adjuster and ourselves, with everyone understanding the nuances of the policy and the wording and the claim at the initial stages. So the other day with our hail claim is just bringing to your attention that there is a micro cracking clause in the wording. So you can have that conversation up front, and then we can take the steps going forward to using infrared drones, etc. And then at least everyone knows right at the beginning instead of right at the end that this could come in and could affect the adjusting process further down the line.
Yes, I think like the microcracking is a good example. You have some insureds that have had plenty of claims, and some that are, let's say, on the more recent bid windows, and they've put in panels and there was a hail damage event. And obviously you'll have two categories. One is visibly damaged panels, and others, they don't look damaged, but 6 months down the line the claim's been finalized and somebody says, oh, these panels aren't performing, and now what do you do? So had you had the conversation about the micro cracking and the implications of the policy, that's it. And often I found that if you can show, we work on an objective basis. It's not he said, she said. The wording says this is the micro cracking, this is what happened, and we can all agree on what the facts are. And look, I mean, this is the other thing as well for us is to get as quick as possible acceptance of the claim. The merits of the claim is the first hurdle for us, I think. We like to get a preliminary report out to insurers, but the point is, once we have enough information working with the experts, sometimes a fire is very simple. It's a felt fire that went into the solar farm. Sometimes it's a breakdown, and the breakdown was with an old machine that was due for a service in a week's time, and then it's going to take a little bit of time, and we have to manage that process. So getting that information together was the first hurdle, is the insurer accepting the claim. And once they've accepted the claim, we find that things open up a little bit, and we try to get that over the line with an interim payment. Interim payments are really beneficial, especially early on in the claim, as long as we can give the insurer comfort that they're not going to overpay. There's other nuances on value at risk and so on, which we can briefly touch on later. And then, yeah, closing the loop. I mean, maybe that's a discussion for another time, but there was underwriting, there was this claim, and everybody learned some lessons. But often I find that we don't have enough conversations to sit down afterwards and say, what could we have done better? What went wrong? And especially in today's age where, there's a lot of co-insurers, there's different people, different risk surveyors on, the claims process took a certain turn. Closing the loop is really a thing that I think can more time can be spent on. And I think just a brief slide before I get into the renewables. The hiccups, I think they will happen. A lot of them can be avoided, and they generally all happen in the first couple of weeks of the loss. So these are just things that I've seen in dealing with these types of losses. Late notification. I've got an arrangement with many insurers to say, well, if you're not sure whether the claim is going to go over the deductible and we are on the panel, just send us a notification and we'll deal with it. And if we're not going to go and make a meal out of it, but we can quickly ascertain whether we think it's going to be a loss in excess of deductible or not. Because the other side of it is insured writes a very brief email. They were busy with 10,000 things and they didn't really give much detail. Send it to the broker, and the broker says, well, I don't really think this looks like a loss. And then 3 weeks later, you find out, no, hang on, actually, this loss is 10 million rand. The deductible is 1 million rand. Now we're sitting in the situation where the adjuster gets appointed months or weeks or months after the fact, and we're off to a bad start. Red tape, some companies have very complex structures, and by the time it gets to the poor person involved in insurance, it's already been some time. So, a claims protocol, I think, is exactly the same as a disaster management system. Is the question you got to ask is, we've done all this work, we've placed this good business, everybody's okay with the terms, etc. But what now in the event of a claim? And it doesn't have to be a complicated document, just a simple thing. For us, it's not about the claim form. I almost never read a claim form because these matters are complex. They've got their own life and personality. So who's going to be notified? How many insurers, co-insurers are there? Are they placing slips? One group of guys here, some people in the UK, that sort of thing. And I think it's the insurer's prerogative, of course, who they wish to appoint in terms of claims, and that has a lot to do with what information has been provided early on. And sometimes a 10-minute conversation with the right person in the beginning of the claim is super invaluable to the life cycle of that claim. And here's another one. I mean, we've got sometimes we go to a claim where an insured has had his household, his claim for his geyser was rejected, and now insurers are all persona non grata, and this assessor who's coming to site, he just wants to reject my claim. That expectation management doesn't help anybody. So we often find with some insurers we have to explain the process, what it is we're doing, why we're doing this, and we've also found with brokers that we have good relationships with in the industry that once they also bought into the process, it makes things a lot easier. And declarations, especially the more complex business, is very important for us. We can use them to estimate the size of the loss, have them available, especially loss of gross profit on business interruption. That is a conference that some of my other colleagues can have, just dedicated to declarations. It's quite important. So let's jump in, or we can pause there quickly, Jared. I mean, it's 25 minutes to go, and I'm about halfway. So maybe there's any particular question on that process.
Yeah, thanks, Albert. I've been monitoring the chat, and I keep asking if anyone wants to pose any questions, but I haven't got one yet. Hold on, I see one's popped up. From Chris, could you please provide your view as to whether a pairs and sets clause should be included on wind farm risks with regards to blades? Straight into the renewable claims questions.
Can we pause that one for when we get to the wind
Sure.
turbine? Definitely.
Okay.
Okay.
That's the only one so far. So just continue, and I'll pop up when another question comes.
Okay. No, that's great. So yeah, we are navigating renewable energy claims. It's another AI generated image, quite trippy, but effectively renewables all have one thing in common. They have electrical infrastructure that put power onto the grid, and they generate the power in different ways. So for a lot of insurers, the transformers and the power articulation, that is quite familiar, but the part where the power is generated is unfamiliar. And that's why I was going to look at 5 technology types: the hydroelectric, photovoltaic, so PV, solar, wind power, and I'm going to say why I'm saying onshore. And then there's concentrated solar power, which is lesser known, and the biogas, which I think some people might be very afraid of. So this is again, all these images came from internet. It's nobody's IP that I've taken, and I'll never put any insured's information on here. This is an overview of Cahora Bassa Dam in Mozambique. I had the privilege of adjusting a claim there in 2017. Details, obviously, I can't share, but it's a phenomenal facility. If you just look at hydro in Africa, there's a number of hydro facilities across the country, across the continent. And when I say Africa, because I think Jared and them operate, their intention is to work into Africa, and we certainly serve sub-Saharan Africa from a renewables claims perspective. So hydro, you'll find in a lot of places, it's a robust technology, it's deployable, it doesn't require too much maintenance. And we've got 2 types. We've got the hydropower, which is we generate power from rivers or dams, 3.6 gigawatts, which is almost a Kusile power station. And then the nice thing about hydro is it's a base load. It's not seasonal, so not when the sun only shines or when the wind blows. And then we've got pumped storage. So that's Eskom in Gula and that. Okay, this is Cahora Bassa again, absolutely phenomenal facility. And what I wanted to do is just go through each technology type. So this one, let me see if I can find my laser pointer. So this is your typical construction of hydroelectric. Your water inlet comes through this side. You can control your pressure on this side, and then you have all your on this over here. You've got your 2 parts. You've got your part that generates that takes the motion of the water in the turbine and converts it into electricity on the generator through the stator and the rotor. So that's a normal power pack. And on these, the next slide summarizes the types of losses, but obviously we've got dam wall integrity issues, which is not generally covered by these types of policies. But we've got things like turbine blade cracking. Was the cracking sudden and unforeseen? Those questions come up. Breakdowns on gearboxes. These gearboxes have moving parts. Luckily, they are not operating at very high speeds. So wear is generally not such a problem. And the technology is proven. It's been around for a very long time. So it's unlikely it will get serial losses and that sort of thing. On the electrical part, things to look out for is stator bar failures, winding failures, and so on, especially on breakdown of insulation. A lot of the hydro facilities in South Africa and up into Africa are quite old, built in the 50s and the 60s. But interestingly enough, the technology hasn't changed much. And if we then look at, so if I just go to the next one, which is the summary, the implications in the claim, often we've got long interruption periods, so you'll be out for 6 months because they don't make that piece of equipment anymore because it takes a long time and has to be manufactured from scratch. Some hydro facilities have on and off maintenance, so they'll have 5 or 6 turbines in operation and one on maintenance. So as soon as you take an additional one off, you'll have a loss. So generally no spare capacity, let's just say. They're remote locations. I was in Zambia for 2 hydropower claims 2 months ago, and one, it took us 14 hours to get to the site. So you can imagine transporting things there. Those have implications, and those need to be thought about in placing cover. Loss of revenue. I mean, it's pretty simple, but sometimes the claims adjustments can be quite interesting if there's no water, like you've got at Kariba at the moment, and even Korobus to an extent. Then there's adjustments that have to be made. And then, of course, expediting options, and I'm going to mention this at every single one. What money can you spend to get it quicker, and can that amount that you spend be recoverable in terms of the policy and where? So these are nice diagrams from Emerson Process Management, but they just give you an idea on the electrical part and on the moving parts, how many things can be monitored. We're talking about bearing temperatures, shaft vibrations, there's a lot of electrical measurements that one can also make. But the beauty of hydroelectric is that, as I said earlier, it's robust. There's a lot of information that you can have, and you can probably, I like to use the word, intercept most, if not all, of those losses because you can see them coming. The oil starts to show filings of metal, or the vibration starts to increase. So condition monitoring, again, another whole workshop we can have. So that's on hydroelectric. And PV solar, so not household in this instance, although I think that the interest in PV solar has declined a little bit over the last 90 days. But in SA, we've got fantastic resources. I always tell people the same solar panel that you've put in England, you will produce about 2.5 times the power for the same expenditure here in South Africa and somewhere like Northern Cape. So got really good resources. And there's a lot of these farms coming up. This was from Sapphir's website yesterday. So we've got this number for residential is probably understated, but in terms of large scale, we've got a good amount of installed capacity. That's 1.25 Medupis, and obviously not base load, but again, really robust, tried and tested technology, and the technology is just ever so getting cheaper, and it's getting more reliable. We started off 20 years ago with very, very low efficiencies on the panels, and now we're getting far better. So on PV solar, we've got, let's just go back, obviously vast distances, large areas, lots of cables, string boxes. You have to take the power from the panel and into a box, and from the box into the inverter. And this is where things go wrong. The trackers as well. Why do we have trackers? So that some of the panels will follow the sun to squeeze out every bit of efficiency that you can. And then inverters. Here's our little inverter in our house, and here's just one inverter on a section of a panel of a solar farm. Inverter fires are quite common, but there's various reasons for that. So that's what we see, and then obviously battery BSS, battery storage systems. This is the Eskom one that they put up recently, 20 megawatts worth of battery storage. It's a bit of a battery storage is a bit of a swear word in some economies or some markets. But the technologies have certainly improved, and we're going to see more and more of this being bolted onto PV installations in South Africa.
I have a question, Albert.
Yes.
How do you, it comes from Neil, how do you put out a fire on an inverter? I don't know if that's talking about our big utility scale projects or at a house, but probably let it burn. I don't know.
Yeah, it depends. Everything depends on fires. Also depends. It's who was there. What is what is the proximity? What proximity are the other inverters from it? Once the fire started on an inverter, that's it. That inverter can be written off. So whether it's burnt, in my experience, for 30 seconds or for 5 minutes, it's out. So it depends on what the manufacturer's instructions are, but they've got DCP and CO2 and things like that on sites. Water ends up being quite problematic. Yeah, so that's on inverters. But I think there's definitely a shift to using batteries that are UL approved, Underwriters Labs, and looking at the distancing of your batteries and so on. The thing with inverters, and I've mentioned it here, is that there's a lot of DC current. Now, most electrical engineers and electricians, and I'm not one, but I have a friend who's a professor at Wits, and he said to me that people who think they understand direct current, they don't. And there's a lot of people who work on DC and they end up making mistakes that then end up in termination failures and overheating and resistance issues and so on. So if there's an inverter fire or an issue like that, it's generally on the DC side, not on the AC side. Micro cracking of panels, I mentioned that. Obsolescence of technology is a big one on solar. The inverters, the technology evolves all the time, and there's certain clauses in some policies which basically allow they have time periods where they say if it's older than a certain amount of time, then you're entitled to the next model or the next generation. But that can also obviously impact your value at risk and that sort of thing if there's big changes. Yeah, and then obviously acts of God. That's a big thing. Gauteng, up here this side, there's a lot of hailstorms, and obviously with climate change, the environmental surveys or the project surveys that are done, depending on what data they use, they could be using old data that doesn't take into account hailstorms and floods and things that have happened and an increase in the last couple of years. So on power, I've said onshore. This is offshore and onshore. To make it very simple, in South Africa, we don't have any offshore projects, but they use them a lot in the UK and those places. But never-ending, my colleagues in London, never-ending problems with cables, electrical cables from the offshore turbine to the shore. So our little windmill over there, same concept, except the one is turning mechanical energy into pumping water out of the ball, and the other one is just transferring it into a stator. So on our wind turbine, we've got the tower, the foundation, the rotor, the blades, and the nacelle, and then obviously the transformer and all those other goodies. The blade itself, quite interesting how these things evolve all the time. The materials that they use, but we'll see leading edge erosion sometimes. And that could be a design issue. It could be just a wear and tear issue. So most of the time when we encounter claims of these turbines, we ignore the leading edge erosion. But we'll have root cracking at the root. We'll have cracking at the blade tip. And with these, it's important to get the right experts on early on. We've seen that some insureds will continue to operate the blade because they don't consider the crack as catastrophic. But then, of course, when you continue to operate and there is a catastrophic event, then the question is, well, should you have stopped it? Not the easiest debate to have, because it may be a wear and tear thing that was on the cards for replacement. I think a lot of our wind farms in SA are now starting to become older, as they've got in the UK and in Europe. So we'll probably see more claims, and I wouldn't say opportunistic. It's just an insured saying, well, I've got a cracking blade, and will the insurer consider my claim? And that's where we have to look at the wordings. So the question on the wind turbine, Jared, was
the pairs and sets clause, if you're familiar with it.
Yeah, so the pairs and sets, we recently had one in the Eastern Cape, and that's because they were in construction and there was a rigging, a lift. So normally when there's riggers on site and cranes, not riggers, but if there's a crane on site, you will probably almost guarantee some sort of damage. Either they drop the blade or they drive over the blade, or something like that happens. But being a crane operator and a rigger is actually pretty hardcore stuff. So that's exactly why you have insurance. So in this case, one of the blades were dropped, and it was cheaper to buy a whole set from the overseas manufacturer than to buy one, because at the time they purchased this set, that set already became obsolete effectively, and there was another set available. So the question really is, for us as adjusters, we have to put the facts to insurers and say, well, this is the costs involved. If there's a pairs and sets clause involved, great. If there isn't, doesn't mean it's the end of the world. We say, Mr. Insurer, if they buy the whole set, it's going to take us 2 months, and our loss of revenue for that turbine is X amount, and our cost for the turbines is X amount. If we say, okay, fine, we don't have access to the pairs and sets, and we can't do anything with the other 2 blades that are not damaged, but we can buy with their makeup, especially for us at the factory in Portugal or wherever, it's going to take 6 months, and this is the BR loss. The numbers will speak for themselves. I'm running out of time a little bit, but there's quite a lot of, I see there was a hand, maybe they can just type the question there. In the nacelle, obviously, that's where the nuts and bolts are. Some of them have a transformer at the top, and some of them don't. Obviously, if you have a transformer in the top and it's not a dry type, then there's additional fire risk. So there's obviously a tendency to put them on the ground. But that's inside the nacelle, that's where all the magic happens. And this is where your typical breakdown failures and that will happen. So anything to do with mechanical, electrical breakdown is exposure there. And then obviously on the blades, cracking, lightning, bird strikes. Just because it's got a lightning conductor doesn't mean it's going to guarantee you not a lightning strike. So obviously bigger deductibles, that sort of stuff we see coming in on the placing side. I'm going to skip over concentrated solar power. It's in the interest of time. And biogas.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
As the renewables kicked off in 2010 and 11, and we're coming into some of the facilities' middle lifespan of their 20-year PPAs, are you starting to see an upward tick or trend with regards to claims in the wind and solar specifically, with regards to mechanical and electrical breakdown? Obviously, with the wind turbines, they're under huge stresses, the gearboxes, etc., and obviously on the solar facilities, they're in the middle of nowhere with various temperature changes, etc. You know, in the Northern Cape, it can go -3 degrees at nighttime and then 45 degrees in the day. Are you seeing any upward trends? Because what we see in the renewable space is low frequency but high severity claims.
Yeah, so I think I might have mentioned with the turbine blades, I think that's where the issues are happening. Those are wearing. On the gearboxes, if it's a good design, and obviously we don't have the size and the scale of the renewables industry here as our colleagues in London, for instance, but they've said to me that they've seen what you said now. They've seen a higher frequency and a lower severity, and that's with the blades. You can identify with the manufacturer, so whether it's Vestas or Siemens or whatever, you know certain ranges or certain models have a propensity for earlier failure than others. So if you've got a robust model and you look after it, it's going to be good. So yeah, I think that probably answers some of it. So yeah, I've just got some wording nuances here. So this is the typical one that we see with assets or risk policies not in the renewable space, so sudden and unforeseen physical damage to insured property. Then we go to some renewables wordings, and now we've got sudden and accidental failure. They have to caveat, of course, internally manifested. And then they've got a little caveat here as well, shall not mean continuous or repeated exposure to conditions. So it becomes quite interesting. And then there's another one here, means sudden and accidental failure that necessitates repair and or equipment or replacement, and then with the exclusion. So for us, it's always good to know at the beginning of a claim, especially on a breakdown, what is the wording saying? What is the lens we're going to look at this claim with? And is it, if it's a simple external fire or a storm, that's fine. But if we have transformers on a solar PV facility that where you have 2 or 3 transformers having the same failure in a short space of time, then we need to start questioning the sudden and accidental nature of that, as an example. And what better way to do that than to bring in industry experts to tell us, to tell us what the facts are, so that we can sit around the table and debate it. There's warranties. I'm not going to go through that now, but the warranty things effectively are just there to protect the insurer against the insured trying to recover something which he could have or should have recovered from a warranty or a service level agreement policy. And then the series loss clauses, I think that's also just allowing the insurer to protect himself against serial defects that weren't known. And I think you can also have a whole workshop about what's the difference between a latent and a patent defect. Obviously the defects, you don't know about it when you manufacture it, and they might all start popping up after 3 years or 4 years of operation. Really, I mean, just to wrap up, I know I've gone quickly through the last bits, but for the renewable energy claims, I've said claims protocol. There's a lot of contractual relationships here, which sometimes still surprises me, is that there's owners, there's lenders, interests that are noted as additional insureds. There's O&Ms, different contracts between different people, and the PPA provisions also can be quite different depending on which bid window they were in. Obviously there's contracts involved. So if there's a contingent business interruption claim or something like that with Eskom, then we need to understand what are the rights and remedies available in terms of those contracts. And then, as I said here, there's warranties and possibility of serial losses and defects. And then just lastly, this to me is, in a nutshell, we have things to think about. Every year when we do renewal, has that equipment become obsolete? And what has foreign exchange done? We've seen declarations, unfortunately, where insurers have only increased their sum insured by 5% a year for the last 5 years, and then you realize, but it's subject to US dollar or euro currency pair, and they're underinsured by 30%. Obviously mindful of deductibles for certain locations, and then it needs to be the contract needs to be borne in mind when placing these covers. And I think a last thing that's really, really helpful for us, especially in the breakdown claims, transformer breakdowns, gearboxes, and that, is just the record keeping of maintenance. It's the record keeping of the data that measures the vibration, the temperature, whatever. Because when it comes to claim stage, data and facts are power. So it moves us away from speculating rather to having facts on the table. So I think that's it, Jared. That doesn't leave much time for questions and that, but
no, brilliant. Thank you very much, Albert. Yeah, I think that was the gist of the purpose of this session, was just to inform the brokers of, just reminding them of the processes and seeing it from your point of view. I think some good takeaways from that, specifically, the brokers letting the clients know that you're there to assist and you're not there to deny them the claim. I think that's obviously they do start off probably thinking that, which is not a great start. You're there to assist and give them the necessary help to get the project back up and running, basically, as far as I see it. Yeah.
Well, good. I'm happy with that then. If that's one of the takeaways, then great.
Yeah, I think just a hand in hand, it just needs to be, the insured, the broker, the insurer, and the loss adjuster all working hand in hand and not butting heads. At the end of the day, we want to keep loss ratios down, keep the client happy, and keep power evacuating to the grid so we can keep the lights on. So, yeah, we can't have any of our wind farms and solar farms down for an extended period of time, especially in this severe weather we're having now in the winter. So. But yeah, everyone's saying thank you so much for an informative session. Thank you, Albert. Thank you. Well, they're coming thick and fast. But yeah, no, I can't see any specific questions. But yeah, everyone's more than free to email myself or the ladies at iTOO, and we can pass on those questions to Albert. But yeah, thank you everyone for taking the time out of your day, especially Albert. I know you're a busy man all over the continent. Thank you for putting this presentation together. Appreciate it, and it was very insightful. Hopefully everyone learned something, and keep warm and stay safe. And thank you for joining our session. Please feel free to send any questions through to us at iTOO and Renew Risk. Thanks, Albert. Appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.